We have Paul Daugherty ready to go?
We do.
All right. It is time for our main man, Paul Daugherty, from the morningline.substack.com. I was starting to read your piece that came out. We were just getting ready to go on the air. First of all, good Monday morning to you, Doc. How you doing?
I'm great, given it's Monday morning.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful day out there. I don't care what day of the week it is.
Day.
I mean, it's incredible. I was starting to read your article. Were you actually at the game yesterday?
No.
Okay.
The beauty of being retired is I'm not obligated to go anywhere I really don't want to go.
Boy, there is beauty in that. For sure. But I was starting to read it. I wasn't able to get through it because we were just going on the air. And we were just talking, Paul and Casey and I were just talking. Was it a case of the Bengals being that good, or a case of Carolina being that bad, or a combination of the two?
Yes. I mean, Carolina was as bad as any NFL team I've seen in quite some time. In fact, Thom, you know how plugged in we are here at TML. My sources at the commissioner's office on Park Avenue have told me this morning that there's a delegation of Panthers folks talking to Goodell right now, begging to remain in the National Football League. It was just, I mean, I don't know. The Bengals were good, and they took advantage of a team that was obviously not ready or at all into playing. But I don't know what you get from that. It's sort of like when Georgia beats Georgia State at the end of August, right, in the first game of the year. What do you take from that? I think the Bengals gained some reassurance in knowing that they're capable of putting together a game like that, and that's good. And they certainly got Mixon a lot of work and got him into a groove, and he took full advantage, and that's good. Beyond that, I don't know. I still don't know what to make of this team. I mean, this is a team that was behind 25-0 last week and ahead 35-0 this week. What do you say about that?
I'm with you all the way on that. And obviously competition has a lot to be said for that, but not those kinds of numbers, because it's rare in the NFL, as you point out regularly. It is rare to see blowout games anymore in the NFL. Case in point, yesterday, virtually every single one of them came down to the very, very end of the game, except for the Bengals and the Panthers. I did like the fact, Doc, that, and again, I have to, we have to quantify it's Carolina, but I did like the fact, as we talked about, you and I on this show last week, you start asking offensive linemen, and I've heard these guys talk about it for years and years and years, different teams all around the league, that when you start getting pass happy, as they were against Cleveland, and your first 21 plays, 17 of them, you're throwing the ball. Your offensive linemen are always back on their heels, protecting the quarterback. You're never asking them to be the aggressor and go to hit somebody. Do you think, based on what we saw yesterday, do you think moving forward that we might start to see more balance in this offense?
I think that's up to the people who are in charge of providing the balance. I mean, if you don't have confidence in the running game, as they obviously didn't last week, they're not going to go to it. It's a combination of things. You can't just say we're going to run the ball if you can't run it. Now, this week they could. I do think there's something to be said for the offensive line and the running backs as a unit getting into a groove. And if you can pick up 4 or 5 yards at a chunk, you can stay in that groove and everything's great. Up until yesterday, they hadn't really been able to do that. So I think circumstances and performance dictate what you're going to do on offense. They gave Mixon the ball early. He did well with it, and they just kept giving it to him. And you saw what happened. That doesn't take Einstein to do that. But again, I think, sure, everybody would like to be balanced, or in my opinion, at least pose a big enough threat with the run that you can't just play pass defense all day against the Bengals. So sure, that's what they're shooting for. But I think the situation at hand dictates what they do.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the World Series. You wrote a beautiful article the other day yesterday, I guess it was, after Dusty Baker, after all these wins as a manager, of course, had never won a World Series title, had led 5 different teams to the postseason. He finally gets it. And you made note about Rob Butcher, the Reds' PR director, who was around Dusty Baker. Nobody spends more time, for those that don't understand the nature of the job, in baseball and football, but especially baseball. No one spends more time with the manager, not even his coaching staff spends more time with the manager than the director of media relations for a team. Tell the story about Rob Butcher, about how much he thought of Dusty Baker that was in the morning line yesterday.
Full credit to the New York Times. I wasn't aware of this. The Times told the story of Butcher going to Houston, working his connections to somehow get in the ballpark on Saturday night. Dusty had no idea he was coming, and Butcher just did it because of the respect and admiration he had for Dusty, saying essentially Dusty is the grandfather and father you wish that everybody had. That nobody was a better guy than Dusty Baker and Butcher, which just surprised me a little. It's not the Butcher that we're accustomed to seeing, frankly. I mean, he's great at what he does, but he's not exactly open his heart up and let you look at it kind of guy.
Yeah. He's not a warm and fuzzy kind of guy. You're right.
No, he's not, and that's fine. But he did show up in Houston at Game 6 and said after Kyle Tucker made the catch to win the game that he broke down and cried. And he was so happy for Dusty.
Well, you also talked about, though, your personal experience with Dusty Baker after one season.
Yeah, I don't want to come off as if I knew him. I didn't. I didn't know him much better than anybody else who covered the team at the time. But we got along well for the most part. And it was after 1 year. I don't even remember which year it was. It was probably after the last game of the season. I'm in his office and we're just talking. Everybody else is gone. And he says, I want to give you something. I said, I'm a media guy. I'm not really supposed to take anything from a guy I have to write about. But Dusty he gave me a box of note cards. And the note on the cover of the note card was a photo of a kind of a sacred place on the island of Kauai, where people went for peace and healing, right?
This was Dusty, if I'm not mistaken, post 9/11, right?
Yes, they started it right after 9/11, and it is carried on to this day, where people go because there's supposedly a certain aura, a certain glow about the place that makes people feel better. Well, when Dusty first started going there, he had prostate cancer. And he felt like he needed to go there for peace of mind and to figure out his life and what mattered and what didn't. And he said the place did very well for him. And so he gave me this box of cards. And I've got it. I mean, you can't see it, but it's a photo of people walking around kind of a park-like setting on Kauai. Anyway, Dusty Baker is cancer-free, obviously. No longer has problems with the prostate cancer. And I just thought it was very nice of him. It was very nice of him to make a gesture like that to me. And like I said, I wasn't anybody special. He didn't like me any more than anybody else, but he did decide for whatever reason to gift me with those cards.
One final topic I want to get into with you. I don't think you're a voting member. I don't think you ever were a voting member, even though you're a columnist. Correct me if I'm wrong here. About this college football playoff thing. Everything's going to look very different when they go to 12 teams in a couple of years from now, because you'll be assured of a year like this year where we were talking before you came on the program. You're going to have Ohio State or Michigan, the loser of that game, will more than likely still get into the playoff and have a chance to win it. Same thing with a Tennessee team this year after losing over the weekend. Same thing with an LSU team who's red hot right now, beats Alabama over the weekend. Brian Kelly first win over Nick Saban, all that kind of thing. I don't know how closely you're following college football on a regular basis. But, man, and look, a lot can happen over these last 3 weeks of the regular season and then the conference title games in many cases. This thing has a chance to be utter chaos to figure out who the top four are.
Yeah, isn't it great? I love it. I love the fact that Clemson and Alabama very likely will not be taking part in the Final Four this year, as they have done one or the other or both every year since this format came into being. I think it's great. I love it.
But I always say, Doc, it's like, it's not necessarily if you lose. A lot of it so much has to do when you lose. And, we were sitting here debating, Oregon plays the first game of the year. They go to Georgia and they get beat 49-3. Now, Georgia's the best team in college football. They've played like it. They played like it over the weekend. Doesn't mean they're unbeatable, because they are beatable. Everybody's beatable. But to think that Ohio State or Michigan, the loser of that game, could slip behind a team like Oregon, to me, is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, that's a pretty good argument for a 12-team playoff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Did you watch the end of the LSU game?
I did not.
I think you would have been, and I know you're not a Brian Kelly guy. I would be interested if you're able to run down that video of the interview he did right after the game with Holly Rowe. I think there are a lot of people out there that saw a side of Brian Kelly, me included, that I had not seen before. He was brought to tears at the end of that game. And it seemed to be very, very sincere.
Well, the words Brian Kelly and sincere don't often go together in the same sentence. So
That's right.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I think you would. I think you would have enjoyed it. Last thing I want to ask you about is in the college football vein here. If you're Luke Fickell, do you play Evan Prater the rest of this season?
I don't know why. Why would you do that?
Well, you're not going to play in a New Year's Six bowl game. There are some that would say, don't you want to see what you potentially could have for next year? Ben Bryant's graduating. I know you have some kind of obligation to a senior and a final year player and all those kinds of things. But do you want to see Evan Prater at least play some football?
Well, wait, who says they're not going to be in New Year's Six bowl? Aren't they still in the running for the championship in the conference?
Well, they are. But the way they've played this season, there's nothing that's making me believe that they're going to beat Tulane the last game of the year. I mean, they're barely getting by Navy.
Well, Navy is not. I don't know. I think Navy's a different breed of cat.
They
right?
are.
I mean,
they are.
They test your patience and all those kinds. They can make a lot of teams look ugly. I don't know. I mean, I see your point. I guess Fickell would look at it and say, I'm here to win as many games as I can right now, and we'll worry about next year. And as long as we still are being at least discussed in terms of a New Year's Day bowl, that's great for recruiting. I'm going to play my number one guy. And not only that, who's to say that Prater's any better? And you say, yeah, sure, we need to find out. I think there's a time to find out, and there's a time to kind of let it ride. Unless Bryant really stops playing great or stops playing even decently, no, I wouldn't change quarterbacks myself, but I'm not Luke Fickell.
Well, it looks like he's not going, and I'm not endorsing saying he has to. I'm just asking. Yeah. Personally, I would like to see at least Prater get into some games moving forward the end of the year. You don't have to name him a starter.
Why can't they? I mean, haven't they talked about using him in certain situations?
Yeah, but it hasn't happened outside of a game here or a game there. And again, I'm not going to sit here and beat up Fickell, because what this guy has done and is doing is off the charts. I mean, he's the best coach in his town. Landslide best coach in his town in any sport, without a doubt. There's one other thing I want to ask you about. College basketball starts tonight. We have Wes Miller at UC. We have Sean Miller now back at Xavier.
Yeah.
Who has a greater impact for their team? If you can say either one of them has a greater impact, but if you were speculating and just looking into a crystal ball, which of those two guys has a greater impact on the program here this year?
I'd say Sean. Sean has been there, done that. He's a really good basketball coach, controversy at Arizona notwithstanding. He was a really good basketball coach when he was here the first time. I think that the players will respect Sean. I'm not saying that they haven't respected coaches in the past, but I think the level of respect for Sean will be a little bit higher. If I'm Xavier, I'm feeling pretty good with Sean Miller as my head coach.
Okay, all right.
Hey, have you ever heard of a group called the Smithereens?
Of course I have. What do you think?
Well,
I live under a rock?
Yeah. I went and saw them downtown at Ludlow Garage with a friend of mine the other night. I'd heard the name, but I'd never heard the music. Fantastic.
Fantastic. Man. Yep. They were really popular. You and I are roughly the same age. You got me by a year or two, but they were really popular right when I was getting ready to get out of college, and they had, and then all of a sudden they kind of just disappeared under the radar. But they always struck me as one of those bands. That's a tight band. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, tight, very, very hook laden. Every song had a hook. I was rocking out for an old guy, man. It was great. I mean, I'd heard of them, like I said, but I don't. Anything after like Born in the USA for me is not something I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
So that put them right on the edge of oblivion with me. But I was pleasantly surprised in Ludlow Garage. I'd never been there. Historic music venue, fantastic. Just had a great time. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Hey, by the way, on music, did I misunderstand your morning line one day last week? Did you take a shot at the Eagles?
No.
Okay, I want to make sure. But you understand where I might think that?
Well, I did. I took a shot at them because they were the group most responsible for outrageous concert ticket prices. Their music is great. I love their music, but I think they were the first group to start charging 3 and 4 figures for concert tickets.
Okay, because that's one of my all-time favorite bands. I mean, that's big-time band now.
Yeah, I like the Eagles, but I didn't like the influence they had on going to a concert at all.
Are you driving down to Nashville to see Taylor Swift when those tickets go on sale here in a couple of weeks?
I couldn't name you one Taylor Swift song.
Well, I have to tell you, though, Doc, I mean, look, I have to tell you, because you like being entertained. Everybody likes being entertained on different levels. I have to say, I went with my daughter a few years ago, and I have to say, it was one of the best shows I've ever seen, and in a day and age where it seems like so many of the entertainers feel like they have to offend you in some form or fashion, whether it's with their outfits, whether it's with their political commentary, whether it's with their outrageousness in general. She is still someone you could take your daughter to go see, whether your daughter is 10 years old or 30 years old.
Well, that's great. The next time Taylor Swift comes around, I'll have my wife take my daughter to see Taylor Swift.
Doc, have a good day. Thanks for the time.
All right, Thom, you bet. See ya.
All righty. TheMorningLine.substack.com.